So if they think about it differently here, I want to understand that. NGOs in America, one of our strengths is, even though it's a relatively 2 million NGOs in America, it's about 8% of the economy. But it's a great laboratory. It's a fabulous laboratory for experimentation and understanding of ideas. It is actually as innovative as the for-profit sector, even if it doesn't have as much money associated with it. And then what's the government role in relationship to business? So I want to understand that here. If I had to summarize all that, I'd like to understand Finnish sensibility towards managing the commons, the things that we all benefit from and require in order to be healthy in life, versus American. So that's on the social side. So that's a piece I started to engage with others, and there's a whole bunch of people I'm going to be building a list on for talking to, from government officials to NGO. Actually decided I'm going to talk to the pastor of the Rock Church, because she had some really interesting things to say yesterday, et cetera. But the other thing is, for my consulting mission, again, 90% of companies fail to meet their strategic targets. 90%. 85% will never return a proper value to shareholders in terms of equity, return on equity. And 95% of employees will tell you straight out they don't know where the company is going. So I'm here to help fix that. And a lot of that has to do with lending perspective. So companies act urgently in the moment. There is high value to your short-term plans, where you have to execute, right? Nobody executes 5 years out. But you can inform your execution a lot with stretching time and thinking about where are we really going and getting very, very clear on that. What's your role in the marketplace, the ecosystem that you go? We focus on competitive analysis, but we rarely focus on ecosystem analysis. Another thing Finnish people talk about a lot here is ecosystems rather than competitors. What is your role with the people out there doing similar, related, and adjacent things? And how are you going to take advantage of others to do what you might take on, but you know what? You can partner better with somebody else to do it. On the market side, 40% of companies actually overestimate every single year their market demand. So let's help figure that out. And then what's your impact on society, and how do we measure that? How do we track that? So these are the things that I'm going to do to help provide companies with perspective. So that's the overall thing. I am also looking for engagement and or investment in some of the local companies. I think this is a really interesting investment market. Couples went to a pitch day yesterday, and it was amazing. I come from Silicon Valley sensibility, where if you aren't asking for things in 7 figures, you aren't even going to be welcome to the table. And these people were out there pitching for 200, 250. The biggest raise outside of a Series A, which was 1 million, Series C, which was 1 million, was 400,000 for 30% of the company. But I like what this country is thinking about from the standpoint of build here and then become a trade partner to the world in terms of taking your products outside. So I'm looking for companies with commercial and, as I said, social objectives. My own background has a lot in fintech, retail, e-commerce, blockchain, anything decentralized, platforms, ecosystems. There's a whole lot but I would summarize it as fast-moving industries where change is really coming at you. And so the uncertainty factor of what you're doing is high. Seed Series A, and I prefer involvement. A company that I can actually help. It doesn't have to be the case, but it's easy to spend money on others. I kind of like to be part of the team. So that's really it. That's my story.
And then as stated in the thing, if we could just, if you have any questions, just either share them in the signal or others, just so we can rotate through here as quickly as possible. Give everyone your time. So thank you, sir. And then, okay, Catherine,
Catherine or Roberta?
Well, I thought Catherine was going next, but Roberta, if you would like to go. It's just go. Oh, there's Catherine.
Okay.
Okay.
No.
I like how we sit on the table and use the chair. It's kind of fun. Is that the deal?
Yeah.
Excellent. Morning, everybody. It's format I'm really familiar with and one that I really love. We run stand-ups with our teams and our clients every morning, actually. So I appreciate that Damon's put this together, and it's really great to be here, so thank you. My name's Catherine, you know that. So I come from the southernmost part of Southern Africa, Cape Town, and I'm probably the least likely founder of a tech company. I can't code to save my life, but I have managed to find myself in a position where I translate tech speak to clients and try and figure out what that strategic touch point is for them to help them build products and solutions that essentially help them scale. So I come from a background where I've actually never really worked for anyone. From university days, I started my own business, and a previous venture was to build the first niche music streaming platform for Africa. And we got investment from all over, and eventually sold out to the largest media conglomerate on the continent. And that's where I cut my teeth on raising money, figuring out how investors work, figuring out how funds of funds work, and essentially saying, I never ever want to do that again. In fact, I had an investor list called the Mortal Kombat investor list, because that's what it felt like going into combat. So the one thing I did realize early on though is that I'm, for some reason, able to put really great teams together. And the team that we built with Newstream actually followed, and we started a company called 2050. And it was off the back of Amazon Web Services liking what we did and saying, please could you do more of that so that we could refer our clients to you. And we first had to kind of go out and do something else. We built a cloud innovation unit for a software company because we really needed to build up our own funds after running a startup. Even though you exit, there's quite a lot of trauma, so you want to kind of work in an environment that's a bit more settled. But then we started 2050, and we specialize in cloud innovation and AI. We essentially build serverless, and we work with clients who are already in the cloud. So for many, we do help them get there, although there are many companies out there that already do lift and shift and build data lakes and so forth. We're more interested in the guys that are already in the cloud, who are looking at how they can take that stack and essentially scale up from there. The name 2050 is because we realized if we were going to build solutions that potentially include AI and other technologies, we need to be really cognizant of what does that mean for the future. And 2050 feels like this really distant future, and it's not. When I was a kid, there was a program called Beyond 2000. And I remember thinking like, wow, like Beyond 2000, and here we are in 2022, right? So it happens so quickly, and we wanted to really make sure that we firstly put a board in place that looks at the ethics of everything we build, what the impact of that would be for each client that we build it for, and essentially what is that middle distance that we need to work towards. We are now a team of 16 and growing. We work with really big retailers, the 2 largest retailers on the continent, banks, mobile phone companies, and we build everything from internal BI platform tools to mobile order and pay tools, digital digitization of returns processes for retailers, file upload systems for mobile companies who are looking at how they deal with RFPs. We think of ourselves as a little bit of a skunkworks division. So we have data scientists, Golang engineers, and Flutter engineers, and just really smart, cool, fantastic people. And we're fully remote. So the reason I'm here is, firstly, because we're remote and I can be. Secondly, we are potentially looking at how do we take what we do and do that in a broader scope than just the African continent, because nothing really stops us from doing it anywhere. My goal here is to try and figure out what is the Amazon Web Services landscape looks like. So I'm joining things like meetups, I'm meeting the guys that actually run their SSAs, I'm trying to get in with the biz dev guys and so forth, but also who are the partners that work with Amazon and where is it that we complement each other. A lot of people who work with Amazon Web Services will specialize into a particular track. We've specialized in modern application dev, serverless, and actually there are not that many people in our territory doing it. So I'm trying to figure out in this space, are we really far ahead, really far behind, or somewhere in the middle? And if we're any one of those, who do we partner with to help us kind of get into the space and collaborate, because that's how it was in our business. Apart from that, I'm just trying to figure out if bi-hemispherical will work. You've all met, well, most of you have met my husband. He doesn't have to be in one particular place. We don't have kids, so we get to be where we want to be. And I'm in my 40s and I figured now's a good time to look great at Pinterest. So collaboration, smart people figure out who's in the innovation space and see if what we offer can be sharpened and could we offer it to others and collaborate with them to do really, really cool stuff. Our motto is build what matters. So we're looking to do that right here. That's me. Thanks. So since I don't want to bother you with some slides, so I try to do the same as Steve and Catherine. Well, I've been in the technological arena in the last 30 years, even if from a business perspective, since I'm not a technological person. And but in the last 12 years, what I've done, especially in 2010 with my brother, was to found G2, and G2 is a small boutique accelerator in Milan, based in Milan, and we started working with startups. It was for passion, because if I look at money, it's better to do another job, in Italy especially. But anyway, and we, in the last 3-4 years, we moved to work more and more on a vertical, with a vertical perspective. For example, we start work on healthcare, we start work especially on insurtech and fintech, and on green technologies. Especially we collaborate with some startups. One of them is from Finland and it's called TerraLoop, and is I think a game changer in storage, in energy storage. So with this new focus, we try to explore more and more also the issue and what all these industries are facing now for the future. And I totally agree on what Steve said before, because I think that company now has really the needs to look at the future and to build up the future, since the future is something that doesn't exist really, something that we can create together. So in this perspective, slightly before the pandemic, we decided, since healthcare, the health sector is a complex sector, is a complex industry, to spin off this business unit about health and to gather some other partner. For example, Laura is one of the partners of the company, and we are working more and more together to build up the activities, and some other people also coming from the industry, and to build up this company focused on health, to provide and to understand what's going on in the sector and to provide solution and help also startups in this arena to work more and more with the corporate institution. And then pandemic come. We were doing everything to build up the company, but since we enforce more and more the idea during pandemic that something is going to change and something, we do have also the possibility to work more, because I think that pandemic show us also the fragility of some healthcare systems, on especially in Italy, of the territorial monitoring and managing of the disease. So there is a large space in the healthcare industry, and health and pharma and biotech and medtech to build up also a new technological convergence. So to work more and more through digital technologies and biotechs. We see, and we work with some people that this kind of mix, work in this kind of mix between biological field and the technology. So what we are trying to do with Gravity was funded in 2020, but we are active more or less for 1 year. And what we're trying to do is to help companies in looking at the future. So we provide some consulting services. We call them future thinking activities. So we try to have them also to be prepared for also the technological next wave, Web3, and but not from really a technological point of view, from the opportunity point of view. So how technology can be a huge enabler of a new business ecosystem, a new innovation ecosystem. So in our small activity, what we're trying to do is also to build up a sort of ecosystem. So I'm convinced that we cannot grow only internally. I hope we can grow more and more, but not only internally, but by collaborate with other people, with other institutions. So, for example, we provide also services in digital transformation, but it's not something that we want to do from our internal perspective, but by collaborating with some other partner outside. So our payoff is imagine, shape and build a better future with us, if possible. But I want to stress the word better, because we can work on any kind of future, but I think that we work for not only for a business perspective, but also including really people. So for example, in our approach to health, we talk about a patient-centered design way to explore new solutions and to involve more and more people within the management of their health process. We have startups on one side, so we collaborate with startups. We are now building up some small investment vehicle to help them quickly, because in Italy we have really a problem in fundraising especially. And we are here, and I'm very glad to have met such people, smart people, very nice people, and I hope that we can collaborate more and more, also building up new things we don't really know now. Thank you.
Volunteers? All right.
So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to say so that I can remember what I need to say. So I'm going to try and spend like 1 minute on my background, 2 minutes on my business background before I became an entrepreneur, then a few minutes on entrepreneurship, and then most of the time on what I'm doing right now, because that's it's pressing right now. So. Right after I graduated from college, I went to work for a winery, and they sent me to Germany, where I spoke German, and I helped start their subsidiary to import and introduce their products to the German market. And then I worked for them in marketing for a bit, and I went to business school, and then I worked for McKinsey. And I think that philosophically, going to Berlin to live after college instead of taking a job was sort of my first expression of the idea that risk-taking is more important than security. And then going to work for McKinsey after business school, where I was really not, they did a Myers-Briggs test on all of us, and they told me that I was like 1/3 of 1% of McKinsey employees had this Myers-Briggs type, and the rest were like INTJs. And so I realized that I was not really built for this environment, but that was like another risk-taking experience where I was doing something where it was foreign to me, but in doing that, then I discovered things that helped me to grow, and I became good at other stuff. And so while I was at McKinsey, I had an opportunity to go to South Africa and work on a project to merge two brand portfolios. And that led to being there for much longer. They said, we want you to integrate our sales forces now. I traveled all over the place. And then I went back and worked for a soft drink client in the UK, and I realized, oh, wait a minute. I had seen these problems with poverty and access to resources, basic sort of life resources in Africa, and I thought I can take business and repurpose it to fund solutions in developing countries or for people in developing economies. And so that led me to the idea that in looking at their bottled water portfolio, I could create a bottled water business that, rather than coming from France or Fiji or from somewhere up here in some fjord, the product could come from a local place, and the thing that was special about it could be that you're financing water access for somebody in another country. And so that was a really foreign idea at the time. But because of this bent toward doing things that are not, that are sort of on the periphery and haven't yet been done, at least for me, that led me to this idea of founding Ethos Water, which ultimately was acquired 3 years later by Starbucks, and now is in probably 2/3 of their stores in the world, and has funded water access for more than 1 million people, and probably has funded, I think, around $25 million in water programs. And after that, while we were visiting water programs, I ended up meeting Kids with Guns in Africa, and I thought, how can we take the AK-47, this really iconic piece of design, and repurpose it for something positive? So I started a company called Foundry 47. We got AK-47s from the Congo. We funded disarmament programs by turning those things into luxury products like watches and jewelry and accessories. And we removed about 72,000 assault rifles from the Congo. We did a similar thing in the US with Liberty United, and took guns that had been destroyed by police departments and used those. We made a jewelry business, and we used the profits from that business to fund programs for education programs for kids in cities around the US. And in that process, I met a bunch of the people who are investors in my current business and my business partner. And the business that we're starting right now is called Tree. And the mission of Tree is to democratize creativity for people all over the world. And we started working on this last year. Dan, my co-founder, started in January. I joined him in June. He was actually looking for a young CEO and found an old one. And so we started raising money last summer, and had a firm doing the coding for us in Croatia. We then hired our first engineer. Then we hired our CTO pretty recently, and our third engineer recently. And then we were able to fire the not terrific consulting firm in Croatia, and we're ready to launch. We're at the cusp of launch. We've now raised about $2.4 million in seed funding, and we're launching one of 7 target markets at the beginning with a wait list. So we're onboarding a bunch of influencers, and then our wait list is headlined by a claim your name opportunity, so you can get your name on our instead of just entering your email address and joining a list, you can get your name on our social media platform. And so what Tree does is it combines aspects of various other products, most notably sort of Facebook and Squarespace, and then it's a no-code page builder. So we're making what are kind of like Legos out of everything that you already use on the internet. So you can just drop and drag those things onto a page and then put a link in, and they populate with whatever that content is on that other place. And so the basic objective is to make it really easy for people to very quickly express ideas for free. And then there will be a revenue platform that will allow people to pay us for, it's a freemium model, so people will pay us for better features. But effectively, 90% of the people who use this will probably use it for free. And so we'll launch at the end of this month, and that relates to, in part, to why I'm here. I want to make sure that I get this list correct so that you guys know what I'm trying to accomplish. I wrote it down this morning. So I wanted to come here to sort of seed a hub of activity in Europe, in a place where English is broadly spoken, where it's easy to gain access to folks. I could have tried to do that with my old relationships in Germany, but this program is like a perfect place to accomplish this, because the purpose of 90 Day Fin is to help people on both sides to relate to each other. So at least one of the purposes. So I thought that was really compelling. The second objective was to just meet cool people. This reminds me a lot of when I was 22 years old and I moved to Berlin, and I went into the Goethe Institute, and I met a bunch of other people who were really interesting from all over the world, and they had a all had their own backgrounds, but we were all trying to learn German. And we all became friends, and I still have those friends from, you know, when I was 22. And so I'm hoping to get the same kind of lifetime, although my life isn't going to be as long now, lifetime relationships. Third, to explore the opportunity to set up an office for Tree here in Europe for European expansion, and also to understand the operating, tax, and financial implications of doing that. And then lastly, look at Helsinki as a potential home for my family. We looked at moving here when our daughter was born because of the education system. Her middle name is Finnish, and now because of the fact that, and I'm sure that this is something probably, I talk about politics too often in business settings, so I get myself in trouble, but I'm very concerned about the stability of our country. I think that the United States is, the American experiment is at a very fragile time in its history. I remember when I was in college studying the Holocaust and the sort of tightening of the bear trap around the population of at-risk communities in Europe, and asking the question, why are people still in Germany? And so I think that may be a question that some of you are asking yourselves, whether it relates to the United States or China. And so that's something that my wife and I have asked ourselves. We've asked ourselves, where do we want our daughter to grow up? And so that's part of why I'm here. And that's about as revelatory as I can be about my motives. So thanks, guys. I hope that was not too long.
Okay, thank you.
Hey guys, so I hope you got a chance to read what I sent yesterday. If you didn't, don't worry. So Colin, you know me, you've met my family. So it's much easier in your life, I found, to join the dots going backwards than going forwards. I started my life as a professional running coach, so crew to the American types. And effectively what I did is I worked with some really, really talented people and helped them achieve their long-term objectives, which in this case was either winning the boat race between Oxford and Cambridge or going to the Olympics and getting gold medals. And I did this for years, and it was a passion, and I loved it, and it was great fun. And I kind of realized that that's kind of what I've always done after that. Yeah, so I finished coaching athletes, went into consultancy, worked as part of the UK government team running London 2012 Olympics, where I was building facilities, not really coaching athletes. And then ultimately, basically co-founded a bunch of businesses, went all over the world. And now what do? I work with experienced founders who have got long-term goals, and basically I work with them. I don't call it coaching because I kind of don't feel that's what I do anymore, but I support them on things that really matter to them. So that's the business development side, some really chunky big deals that are not short-term, they're long-term, but life-changing for the business. I support them with acquisitions. If they get that wrong, as we all know, it goes horribly wrong. Basically no integration, waste of time, no real value, and I help them with capital raising. And the capital raising isn't about the money, it's about the relationships. Yeah, and it's about the capital to really supercharge their business and grow it. So I tend to work with 4 to 5 businesses at any one point in time, which gives me a little bit of a headache because sometimes everybody wants everything at once, but it's good fun and gives me the variety that I like. And effectively the focus is, there's been a core of my businesses around education technology, but the rest of them are around gaming, around identity, and I spent most of the COVID pandemic basically scaling a COVID test production company. Yeah, because I felt that was the best way I could contribute to kind of easing the pandemic, was produced, in this case, 300 million COVID tests, right? So more tests, more people know they've got COVID, less people spreading COVID, pandemic eased quicker. So that's kind of the journey so far. We ended up in Finland because effectively of Megan. You've met Megan, bit of a me in mini form. It looks like Sarah, but really my brain. And Megan came back, when we moved back from Texas, when she was 10, she basically, we were unpacking the boxes and she said, I want to move to Finland. right? So there was a pitch, just like this. So the pitch went like this. Okay, you brought us back to London, which is where we were born, but we like snow and ice in the winter, and London doesn't have snow and ice. We like lakes in the summer, London has the Thames. It's brown, water's clean, but it's brown, right? If you make me go to school, please note the emphasis on that, if you make me do this horrible thing, surely we should go to the world's best education system, right? So if you make me do this horrible thing, at least make me go to a system where it's good. Yeah, and then the flattery pitch, which is Megan all over, which is, Dad, you can do anything, so go run a Finnish business. That was the end of it. Sarah was in despair because she was just unpacking her boxes from the last move. Wind clock forward, just to give you the context, we ended up moving to Poland for a couple of years. We had a great time, and then ultimately this program came along and we came here. So for Megan, we kind of achieved what she set out when she was 10. So she's 14, nearly 15 in October. So this is the opportunity for them to grow and experience a new system. We always wanted our kids to basically, born in the UK, live in America, travel or live in Asia and live in Europe. And I don't count UK as Europe, not from a Brexit perspective, but the personality of the UK is too strong for it to really establish a European presence. So Poland was super useful because it's so different from the UK. Finland is also super useful because of the Nordic traditions. So that's why we're here. So while we're here, we rented our apartment for 12 months, so we'll be staying hopefully way beyond the 90-day program. You'll have seen in my goals list, the goals are less related to me, they're more related to the guys. Megan, school for the future. Toby's in an easier position because he's younger and can assimilate easier. So Megan, we need to find a school place for her for next year because she doesn't have one. We need Sarah to get a job, which touch wood is kind of looking good. So in arts management, if you find anyone in orchestras or arts management, do help on that side. Because otherwise Sarah will quite rightly go, why are we here? Another move, back to the UK, school. Gravity will hand us that way. And then from a company perspective, obviously I'm here to support some of the companies I currently work with. So Yoti, Steve knows well, in the identity space, and a classic doing good, doing well company, right? Just they're a B Corp, they do all the right things, very experienced founders. And then I'll basically look for deal opportunities for them here, but I'll also look for other opportunities. My companies generally graduate after about 4 to 5 years. So I start with them when they're 10 million ARR, and I generally finish with them when they're about 100 million ARR. Yeah, and at that point, they're either going for the IPO or the acquisition, so I generally step out at that point. Yeah, so I work with them for 4 to 5 years with the experienced founding team, supporting them on those 3 areas we talked about, and then exit when they exit. So I have some that graduate, and then I go back and I get a new one, and then I take them through. Yeah, and then every 3 or 4 years, I get really bored with the consultancy practice, and I go off and I build a company, right? Because, you know, I'm kind of in this halfway house where I have responsibility but not accountability in some businesses. I get the variety, which I like, but at some point I get really excited about a particular project, really want to go deep on that, then grow the company, then do an exit, and then start all over again. And the consultancy I quite like because it fills the gaps between those companies, but it also gives me the variety that I like. And it's been really great to meet you all. And if I haven't spent much time with each of you just because I've been busy, don't worry, I will before our kind of time in Finland comes to an end. Cool.
Thank you.
Can we take like a 5-minute break?
Sure. Yeah, everybody's moving pretty quickly, so.
He's staying on time, no time master.
I know, right? Exactly. So, quick bio break and then come back for 5 minutes, please. Sir? You will? I will use the projector because I want people looking at the slides and not me.
I'm here now.
Whoever wants to volunteer.
I had this moment last night.
Okay, cool.
Oh my gosh. Every time you said, oh, you smell like crazy stuff. So I finally wrote a another day. This guy, and I'm like, because officially work.
No, it's
So these are, of course, and then he brought up Vietnam. I used to be a Russian studies major, so obviously I know the difference between
But clearly it was a
But I was
translation
like, I
issue.
should have had a full cup of coffee before I had that conversation, but I actually was like, anyway.
No,
Anyway, I just felt the need to say that.
Oh, I think that's great. That really helps.
So,
I think it is the Ukraine crisis has really been helpful to us in some ways, which is quite good for society. Because it's made them come to terms with their views on Russia. Right? So, Russia, they might from a lot of amounts 130 years, didn't exist. Destroyed. And then when they came back, for them to live and we always, it's quite if you meet someone in Poland, if they're under 50, they were taught Polish and English in school. If they're over 50, they were taught Russian, and not even, and they learned Polish from right, so there's this whole generation that basically had to learn Russian. And it was
yeah, thanks, sir. All right, I guess it looks like everybody's back for the most part. If not, they can catch the recording. Yeah, right? Is everyone? You are ready, sir.
Separate. And I thought I'd go next before it becomes just too hard to follow all the fantastic stories. Quick fact, I'm trying to intermittent fasting these days, so I'm extremely irritable before 11 a.m. because I have not eaten till then. So if you see me being sort of dark and angry, that's because I'm not well fed. And as my wife will tell you, I'm a totally different person once I'm well fed. So just with that, sort of starting to while I try and tell what I'm trying to do here. So my story really, I've been an entrepreneur throughout basically. So built 3 companies, 2 successful, 1 bad. But as a child as well, selling things, trying to create revenue streams, etc., etc. So it was very natural. I grew up in a small town in India called Lucknow, and I spent a little bit of time in London. So I was desperate to get out. So as an 18-year-old, against the wishes of my family, I boarded the plane and went to the UK. My family was I guess a little upset that somebody had so clearly violated a diktat, especially my grandfather. So I thought I would not go back to them and ask for support, etc. So that's how my first company got started. So I built a company in the UK as an 18-year-old selling bouncer services to bars. This is still the most fun I've ever had. It was incredible. We had the best clubs in Nottingham on our client roll, and I could just walk into any club as a VIP. And people were just like, "Who is this little scrawny?" I was lot less prosperous back then. Indian dude walking into these bars, and all these huge hefty guys are like waving even, going, "Yeah." Probably drank so much that I did long-term damage to my liver, but totally worth it. Sold that business because it became far too big, and honestly I was bored out of my wits managing. We actually ended up having the security contract for the Manchester United Stadium, which was both very good and exceptionally painful. So I think that was the trigger that allowed us A, to sell the company, and B, get out. I thought I made a lot of money, but back then, and looking back now, I was like, oh my God, what an idiot. So after that, ended up doing something even more boring. I qualified as a chartered accountant. I forget what it's in the US, whatever the heck it's called. CPA, yes, CPA. With Price Waterhouse in London. The most boring thing I've ever done. So after the most exciting, the most boring 3 years of exceptional pain. Managed to somehow figure out how to finish and qualify it, because I'm an Indian, can't quit otherwise. I think anything else, if I didn't have that Indian upbringing, that you have to see this through, I would quit on day 1. So got to the end, and quit immediately after that. And moved back to Asia, so worked with a multi-billionaire, which was really fun. So worked for Richard Chandler, who is a Singapore-based multi-billionaire. So ended up running his India office. We had $1 billion of exposure to India, investing in banks, insurance companies, bunch of things, and it was a great learning experience. 6 years there, healthcare, education, bunch of things. But the entrepreneurial itch was back, so started another business in India. That was interesting. We built healthcare centers, etc. Did okay. I might sell that as well. And then I decided, learned from that I'm actually better working with founders rather than as a founder. Just not focused enough. I've seen some of the best founders far more focused, far more execution driven than I am. I'm much more excited about the ideas and how big this can be. So I decided that the best place for me is venture, and started Leo Capital, which is what I run today. We are a Singapore-based tech firm. About 10 million in assets under management, 45 companies in the portfolio. Invest. My LPs hate it when I say this, but we invest globally. My LPs think I invest in India and Southeast Asia, but that's okay. Roberta, I also founded the India InsurTech Association. So we are a 200-member strong association now. Idea being how to improve InsurTech companies coming out of India. And sort of tying it all to why I'm here, we live in Singapore. I think after a while, Singapore's managed democracy chafes. So, the chafing got a little bit too much for me, not too much for my wife. And we have to be obviously careful what we say. Singapore is great, blah, blah, blah.
It's not a club in
It certainly isn't. And I think we were both looking to figure out where else we can live. So we took a sort of, compass and centered it in Delhi and drew a circle around 2.5 hours forward and back. That's time zone that's manageable. So here we are. So the idea here is that if this works, it's going to be a nice long-term residence for us. I mean, obviously we have to test the winter and a bunch of other things. But that's the primary reason to be here. And of course, the other reason I think Peter mentioned, which I've never done an MBA, and people keep telling me that MBAs are great for building great relationships and cohorts. I thought this was a great 90-day process. So accelerating that, because quite frankly, I don't want to sit in a class and try to learn stuff. Might be a bit late for that. And that part has actually been filled already, so I'm pretty sure we're going to have some great long-term relationships here. And the long-term Helsinki part, we'll have to see how that goes. Thank you.
Is this you at your most irritated?
Sorry?
Is this you at your most irritated?
Correct. I am very hungry at the moment. There's 1 hour left till my fast to end, and this is peak. And I've not been able to get a coffee this morning. So
You're not angry, you're like nice.
hanging in there.
All right, we're rocking through this pretty quickly. Other volunteer, otherwise I'm from the South, and then it's ladies first, so I'll just start yanking. There we go, say hi. Hey. Appreciate that nudge.
All right, I'm Hulda. So Andy and I are here in Finland in part because we knew we had to leave our beloved property in Oregon because our kids just needed a better schooling situation. So we kind of were looking at other places in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest, which we love, but because I have a position that lets us live anywhere, I thought, well, maybe we should look farther afield, and so that's part of the reason that we started looking at Finland as a possibility. The company that I'm with, Arenco Systems, has been around for 40 years. It's reasonably well established in the field, but still doing something somewhat innovative in the field of wastewater equipment, which is definitely, I think, the least exciting sounding industry that I've ever worked in. I used to work on aircraft carriers, I used to work for Boeing, and then I fell in love, and now I work in wastewater, but it's actually a really interesting industry, and especially, I think, in the Nordics, where, as others have mentioned, there's a greater sense of collaboration for solving the problems, perhaps even collaborating with your competitors. And I think especially when you're coming down to the sense of how do we protect the water that we all of our children will, it doesn't really matter who cleaned it as long as it gets clean. we're kind of innovative in our space because we focus on smaller towns and remote installations like luxury resorts that are built on an island or on some coastline or something like that, or a glamping facility, or just a place where it's harder to put in a sewer facility economically. The piece of it that really speaks to me, having grown up in a small community of about 2,500 people, is finding a solution that will do a good job technically, but also not break the finances of the town for decades and generations to come. That's something that we do well, and in part because the technology grew kind of from the smaller end with a small community in Oregon of about 300 people on a world-class fishing river, and so trying to find a solution for them and growing it slightly larger versus what normally happens in the industry, which is they take a technology that's really designed more for a large city, and they keep trying to scale it down until it's no longer efficient, or you can't maintain it with the type of personnel that you're going to find in a small town. You know, we've had cases where the school principal also is the police chief, also checks in on the wastewater system once a month, and just from an economic perspective, hiring one person to manage your wastewater treatment system could break the city's finances versus even if you could find that person and keep them. So I'm an engineer by background. I still do some project engineering here and there, but I guess from the satisfaction, aside from feeling like at the end of the day, if a project goes in the ground, I feel good from an environmental perspective. Just the social questions that come up when you're trying to work with a client or work with a regulator, and that's definitely never been my specialty. I went into engineering because I was terrified of speaking to people. And now somehow I feel like I'm almost more of a social worker when I work with some of these smaller towns. But it's very satisfying. It's very challenging. But I'm also really excited that our company is finally, after 40 years, looking to expand to further into Europe. We do have partners in Greece, but we're looking at how we might work in the Northern European space. Specifically, if you happen to run across anyone who does something in phosphorus removal or phosphates, let me know. That's a collaborator I would meet right now, but aside from that, just I doubt that Finland will be my main market, but I could see working with a company that's based here or that has distribution here. For focusing on other parts of Northern Europe that are probably a better starting place for us. Anything else? I'm also here too with Andy, who has some of his own mission, but I guess if there were time we could talk about that. But all right.
You want me to jump up or do you?
Yeah,
Why don't you go first?
Go ahead.
Why don't we let the 90-day Finns go first?
There you go.
Then I'll, if there's time,
Hi everyone. Lovely morning. Great to connect with you all. I've got some, I'm going to try to go through the agenda before I'm Isaac. I was born in Ghana and moved to the States when I think I must have been about 14. Went to high school in Chicago. I've been involved with technology since that time. Started out programming software. I grew up around music, musical family, and my dream was to be a professional musician. And when I fell in love with technology at that early stage, I wanted to combine those two things, right? So when I started programming, I thought I'd find a career building synthesizers and samplers and so on. So I actually started doing that when I was in high school. And when I got to college, obviously went into computer science and continued developing my programming skills. And when I got done with college, I at that time I built a few synthesizers and things, and tried to get into a career with Roland or Yamaha. And all those jobs I came to find out were in Japan. So that wasn't gonna work out too well. So I started out with a career at Amtrak in the IT department in Washington, D.C. And one of the first significant things I did was built out the point of sale system for the trains. So if you're on the Acela, the Amtrak going between New York and Florida and so on, that was one of the first things that I developed. And we ended up having IBM come in and build it out as a commercial platform that went on vehicles from that point. 3 or 4 years into that, I decided to get out and start doing consulting for organizations. So at that point, there was a pretty big demand in DC for, we were getting into the client server world. So there was a huge demand for people that could come in and help with integrations and so on. So I found myself heavily immersed in that world, doing a lot of integration, consulting, building out different client service systems, and basically connecting the dots and helping folks migrate from the old mainframes to the new paradigm. Around that time, I also started having thoughts about, if I wanted to do something in business, what would it look like? And it never really became clear what that path would be, but I knew I wanted to be creative in the technology space, right? Beyond what I was doing. So years later, I found myself in Silicon Valley, working with a semiconductor technology company. This company was making equipment that was being used to print chips. And the technology that I was involved with was really the system that collects all the measurements from the instruments that are being used for making chips, and taking that data and turning that into some form of intelligence that could be used for both risk management and fault finding on the wafer surfaces. So basically taking data that you can't see with your visual eye, 30 nano at that time, and then recreating images for analysts to be able to use that information to make decisions on what wafers are good or what wafers are bad. At that time, fabs were spending about $50 million a day in production. So if it means you have a bad batch of wafers, you can't process them for 9 months, you want to get rid of it as soon as possible. And that's the technology that we were developing at that time. And then the dot-bomb happened, and I took a couple of years off. And during those years, I wanted to, I spent those 2 years playing a lot of music in San Francisco, and also thinking about what I wanted to do next. And that's when I started Origo Software. And what we decided to do at that time was take all the learnings from my previous career and kind of bake it into a platform that could serve us both from a consulting perspective. If we're getting involved with a client that needed a transformation process, how could we use a platform to service that client, but also create something that could easily be repurposed to build across verticals if need be. So we tried to get funding at the time, couldn't do it because there was no funding in Silicon Valley at the time. And so we went down the road and started building it ourselves. And along the way, onboarded clients like Sprint. We ran the Lifeline program across all 50 states for a number of years, and so on. So we got clients from the banking industry, finance, and so on that we've helped with that platform. Fast forward to now, a few years ago, we decided to take one of the verticals that we built, which is a healthcare platform that we deployed in South America and decided we were going to try to deploy it in Africa. 9 months later, COVID happened, right, while we were in the middle of that. And so it really gave us the impetus to, we felt like we were doing the right thing. And we deployed it in Ghana a couple of years ago, and it's doing quite well. It's serving the purpose. We have an altruistic purpose with our business. We want to be able to serve humanity and make a difference with what we're doing. So, so when the 90Fin opportunity came up, I thought, well, number one, I always wanted to spend time in this part of the world, and number two, we think that there's something that can be learned from this environment, from the perspective of what's going on with the global climate change that we're seeing. This climate has had a harshness to it, and there's something that we think we can learn that we can apply to our healthcare model everywhere else. And so that was attractive to us. And then just learning about this space here to see if it makes sense to do what we do here. And what we do is with the telehealth, it's a telehealth platform. We're connecting patients with doctors, specifically focusing on behavioral health at this time. But it really does cover, any type of healthcare need. But we think behavioral health is a very strong, there's a very strong need for it right now, post-pandemic geopolitics and all the stuff that's happening across the globe. We're seeing signs of very early problem that's going to be occurring globally, and we want to be part of that solution. So that's why we're here, hoping to learn a lot and also hopefully get a footprint here in the Nordics for what we do.
All right, how many more official 90-day fins do we have? You need the projector, correct?
Yep. Guess I have to use a computer, huh?
You do need a computer, unless you have some totally cool innovation.
I do, but
I actually met a guy who was chipped. They have here, so like Bluetooth here.
Maya.
Debbie.
So I apologize, first and foremost. As any good technologist, I like to hide behind my technology. This is why I have a presentation. I'm sure Damon feels this as well.
Very easy to overachieve and have slides.
Yeah, it took me about 5 minutes, so don't get too excited. All right, so, yeah, good enough. So I'm here to talk about the what and the whys of why I'm here. And I think I've spent a good amount of time with most of you. Some of you I have spent more time with, but I think this is a really good evening out of the kind of things you'll find out about me, if you're interested at all. Agenda, what do you do professionally? I think this is the most mysterious part about me. And why am I here in Finland? I think this is a little bit less mysterious. So hi y'all. in case you don't already know, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't, I am Chi Hua, or otherwise AKA George, because that's the name that people actually can remember. I am what you would call a technical entrepreneur. So I am unlike many of you here who are natural entrepreneurs and are heavily business oriented. I'm a complete dummy when it comes to business and had to fail many times before I became an entrepreneur. And I am still to today a technology focused entrepreneur, meaning that I focus mainly on technological innovation. And I'm the executive director. That just means that I started a company, ThoughtForm Labs, and I'll get into that a little bit. My background is from most recent to least recent in AI, all forms of that you can imagine, both mundane and exotic. Cloud computing from the very beginning, cybersecurity as part of running technology companies, software engineering, quality, and infrastructure, kind of my bread and butter, also very early to that. And also mobile computing, very early into that. If you guys ever develop application for Nokia phones, Java ME, Java, very limited devices. We were on mobile devices even way back then. And lots of focus on SaaS, building both SaaS-based services and products, mostly in B2B. So to cap it all up, I'm a scrappy tech entrepreneur. I've been in the trenches, I've survived. I haven't lost my soul yet, so I count myself very lucky. So what do you do professionally? So I have to apologize to all of my 90-day Fin cohort peers, in that it's hard to find information about me. And this is specifically designed because there is a good purpose. There's a reason for that. And the reason is because in the environment that I find myself in, big companies are extremely predatory, and they rather come and track down you and try to either buy you, hire the people that you have out of your company, or literally trying to kill you in the crib. So as part of what I'll talk about in terms of ThoughtForm Labs, you will find out why. So by day, ThoughtForm Labs is, just as right off of my LinkedIn page, a boutique AI consultancy. So I'm a consultant. I deal with other companies. I teach them how to use AI specifically around the concept of capturing institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge is a fancy word that means existing people smarts of people running companies. And they develop these know-hows over a long period of time. And generally when they leave the companies, they take their institutional knowledge with them. And then you're left with all the people who are there trying to pick up the pieces or do it entirely differently. So my focus with ThoughtForm Labs in consulting is to help them capture that by using AI as observation and almost like a behavioral twinning based on observations of how inventory levels move, how behaviors move, how interactions move as they go through the company. So capturing some of that knowledge so we can scale it, or so we can use it for educating the existing staff. You know, all the kind of boring mundane kinds of stuff that you think of with AI. But by night, things get a little bit more exciting. ThoughtForm Labs is also an R&D and IP holding company, meaning that any crazy idea I have around AI using intelligence to do something cool and interesting become my IP portfolio. And typically, this has been working out pretty well for me. Based on some of these IP portfolios, I tend to either bring my toys into a company for a percentage. Sometimes they'll ask me to be a co-founder as well, and I'll take more percentages for that with my toys. And my goal has always been to get in and get out as quickly as possible, because I'm the guy who does not go from 0 to 1. I'm like a 0 to 0.5 for any company. I get them the prototype, I get them the baseline to customize it for the vertical, and then I'm looking to either build a team or trying to build the processes so I can extract myself to move on to the next thing, because innovation is the key of everything that I do. I'm more interested in innovation, not so much company building. But by necessity, I have to pick up some of these skills, because or else you're going to fail even more times than you already have. So hopefully that kind of clears it up a little bit about what I actually do. The reason why you can't find a lot of information about me is because I have to protect the trade secrets as part of the IP holdings. And I've had many run-ins. My latest one is with Amazon. Tried to sue me out of existence, they lost. But as a result, I have to take extraordinary measures in protecting what I message or what I do. As I think I'm on some kind of hit list with them because what I do seems to be of some kind of threat to them. So what's in the oven, right? Like I say that I'm an IP incubator, like what am I incubating? What am I cooking up? So for a long time, I can secure some of the ideas. I have about a portfolio of 12. These are not one company ideas. They are each probably at least 3 or 4 companies, if not 10-ish, in terms of what composes these things and what take that to make them successful. And this is part of the reasons why I'm almost never interested in building up any little parts of it. I'm interested in sharing strategically these ideas so we can assemble an ecosystem to actually do some of these things. Ambient intelligence, these are intelligences that work in the environment, so the environment senses you and react to you. This is much more beyond things like your smart sensors and your smart displays. This is much more about informational awareness of systems based on intelligence that's floating around either on your device, the cloud, existing server farms, or a combination of all three. Privacy as a utility, an idea that I've been playing around for a while based on multi-party encryption, so that you have ultimate control of your data because you can't unlock it without your explicit permission. And that's in development. It's a little bit harder to make work because a lot of things has to happen before that can be adopted. And something that I'm been thinking about for quite a while, which is to use AI as protection for people as opposed to being victimized by AI. Large companies are using AI to gain all kinds of information about you. What I'm interested in personal sentinel intelligence, is to turn that back around and have an AI that sits with you and protects you on all the data that you're exposing back to the other AI systems. So in some respects, it includes aspects of adversarial AI, meaning that I present information in a way to an AI that makes it basically incomprehensible for their systems. And I know how to do this because I built them. I know what breaks them. So all this is techno-babble to all of you who are not technologists or maybe don't care about AI. So why should you care, right? What really sort of ties all of the concepts in the bullpen together for me? And this is something that I've heard over and over and over again in all of your presentations, which is a personal sense of mission. You guys are all doing business not for business sake, but there is something about this running a business or a personal vision and mission that's driving you guys towards your ultimate goal in doing business. And I find this to be super cool about this group of people. In essence, I want to create a future that looks more like this. This is, for those of you not in the States, a Star Trek vision, and this is plastic Star Trek vision of how the future should be, where people are actually working together to overcome issues, acknowledging fully that there are going to be issues, but at least people are working together on trying to overcome those issues. Versus this vision of the future. Do you guys recognize this scene? This is Atlanta in about 10 years. But this is Blade Runner. Yeah, this is the Hades scene from the very beginning as they're starting to fly through. And the whole premise of cyberpunk is to show you how technological advance does not always lead to utopia. In fact, it rarely does, right? People's problems are going to be amplified, and therefore you will have a scene much like this. And this is the kind of future that I am actively working, even in my technological innovation, to try to prevent.
New York looks like that today.
This is why you're here, right? This is why you're trying to bring your daughter here. So why am I here? Discovery, it's a huge part. I think many of you have mentioned this, really to understand the local ecosystem, how people do business, how they think, where the supporting infrastructure are for businesses, and where the focuses are for themselves, this society, in this region in general, in terms of what they're thinking about and how they're thinking about it. Networking, because Helsinki partners extraordinary level of access into a nation, right? Into the kinds of people who are operating not only in the country, but also in the region and on the continent. So what better way to discover an ecosystem than to have this kind of leverage and network? And really to get to know the quirks of this ecosystem. But most importantly, I am here to really establish a close relationship with you guys. You guys are the reason why I'm here, really. Aside from some of the reasons I mentioned as well, I would say more than 50% of the reason for me being here, because you are an amazing and extraordinary group of people. And not just you in this cohort, but the previous cohort as well. And I want to establish this relationship, establish some kind of conventions that we can continue to reach into not only the last cohort, this cohort, but also all future cohorts, to create a sort of network, a close-knit network of people that can rely on each other to bounce ideas off of, to collaborate, to work together, and to do anything that we want to, right? These are a powerful group of people, and real change can be had when you get powerful groups of people together who has personal relationship, not just the business one. So fingers crossed, here are my wishes. Right time, place, mindset, resources, ecosystem to build my next company. Colin, I feel you. Consultancy generally for me is about 3.5 years before I get extraordinarily bored. So I'm looking for the opportunity, and if these things align, then I might be able to come, because without these things, they're unlikely to really succeed. Possibly exploring professional path and opportunities for my wife. She's a scientist. She's an ecologist studying climate change and a professor at a university. So I want to see if there's anything either to be created or a network of people that can potentially show me a way forward to find for her, so that there's a possibility of actually moving here. And finally, leading to the final point, right? Potential paths for permanent residency, some kind of establishing a foothold here in Wisconsin and potentially more. Biggest surprise. Thank you, Colin, for that. That was an awesome thing. So even in a room full of Finns, I am still the most introverted guy. You are fine. So it's basically there's nowhere on earth I can go where I won't be the most introverted guy on earth. So that is the biggest surprise for me. And of course, all media material belongs to the people. If you actually have a question, don't email me, just come talk to me. You'll probably dig more information out that way and find out more just how much freakier I actually am as a person. So,
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'll try to go through mine as quickly as possible, because I know everyone has things to do, get to, and then like George, I also like to hide behind technology, so please don't look at me, look at the screen. All right. I'll do this now. Okay, cool. All right, so I'll quickly go through a little bit of this. This is my personal website, so just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Texas, so that's why I say sir and ma'am. That is nothing about age, that has everything to do with respect. And I have worked in my space for quite some time. I'll give some examples of that as well. And I am really a big fan of community building. So I have started a variety of different meetup groups. Essentially, I like hanging out with people. I too am rather introverted, but it doesn't mean that I don't like bringing smart people together in a room and to see what it all they create and things like that. I've been very fortunate also to be able to present at a variety of places. I think now I'm at 41 countries that I've been able to go to and talk about essentially the things that I'll quickly show you. And because I believe in eating my own dog food, this is an interactive Web 3D site. PowerPoint is the slow death. So anyways, let's move on. So it all starts back in 2000. I read a book called Snow Crash, learned about this thing called the metaverse, completely changed my life. At that time, I was going after international corporate law, but then pivoted after I talked to some attorneys and found out what that was really like. And then I decided to become a self-taught front-end web developer with a focus on interactive 3D. I am a hobbyist, I would say, because there are people who actually do it professionally and are good. I build stuff that works, but it's ugly. I'm better at leading teams to be able to do these things. And back in 2000, I essentially got connected with the Web3D consortium that's developed the ISO standard for Web3D graphics since '97. And I essentially became, I think the nice way to put it for most of them is a pain in their ass to say, hey, how can we get this into schools? And so for the first 3 years, I was very active on working with industry and academia on developing curriculums for other students like myself, because at that time, having parents that were educators, especially a mother who was a special needs teacher, I saw how could we use immersive technologies to help build on constructivist learning methodologies, experiential learning, and some of these other things, and help with some of those tasks that drives teachers crazy. So for example, my mother spent 3 times a week for 6 months trying to teach this young man how to say his name because he wasn't smart enough to test into special ed. So the kind of things that would make a sane person go crazy, how could we use technology? And what was very neat about this ISO standard, which still exists, is that it's really about building the interactive 3D content. It's not about the viewing layer. So everything that I built could be used in browser-based, VR, or AR systems. It's just back then they were $250,000 and things like that. So I don't believe in VR, AR apps unless it's like art or experience or for entertainment. I'm more about you have 2D and 3D data that you need to communicate, and you need to start with mobile first and then scale that as the person needs to understand the information. So, so with that said, I then in about 2008, there was a group that came together called the Open Metaverse Roadmap, and they expanded upon Neil Stevenson's definition of this to include augmented reality, live blogging, which has now become social media and things like that, mirrored worlds, which was kind of also my other love, right? How do you take Google Earth and PlayStation and smash them together to add value? And then of course virtual worlds, which right now is, when you hear people say, oh, we're building metaverses, it's cute, but it's wrong. What they're building is virtual worlds, because I would say, switch metaverse with internet, right? Virtual worlds with websites. So Roblox, is not making an internet, they're making virtual worlds, right? Meta is making virtual worlds, right? So, so this is a great thing, metaverseroadmap.org, for anyone who's interested to go see what a lot of bright people came together and kind of defined. So then expanding upon this, I was fortunate enough back in 2006, I did not realize I was showing up at the guy's house, but the guy who co-created Web3D or VRML, for those that know it, I drove 32 hours because he didn't answer an email of mine to knock on his door, talk to him for 2 hours. That actually led me to a job of working at his company in San Francisco. So I moved out there in 2016 and was able to get into the virtual world space. So everything that we're seeing now about all this investment into all these companies that are doing these things, it was there before, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the people now aren't looking back to learn from those lessons. But it was a really great opportunity for me. I was able to see that whole 4 people in the San Francisco thing, how that got funded, a lot of no's. Funny story about that, he came in one day frustrated because some young punk kid said, why does the internet need to be 3D? 2D is just fine. That was Mark Zuckerberg. But anyways, so moving along. So during this time, again, I was all about how can I help other students? And so this was at Stanford, and so it was about, how could I help other students, find out how to kind of build this future that we want to see. And so I was very fortunate to be able to represent, students and things like that, and talk about how a variety of different projects that they were working on, everything from medical applications to actually like cartoon experiences in 3D, where you could essentially watch the characters and you could see it from the point of view of the director, but then after the first play, you could actually click on a character and then go with them and follow them around, right? Because it was all about an interactive 3D scene graph and not necessarily 3D that was being rendered. And so I myself focused mainly on two verticals. I like to help things, so I looked at healthcare. So this image actually, for quite some time, you could just Google search medical augmented reality and this would pop up. I have no idea what this says. I just kind of Google searched it again and then found this. I've seen myself pop up, but this is where it was showing where a group of students and we built a interactive 3D application for learning basic information, right? You know, it was just showing information. But the idea of this is that this was embedded into a web browser, and then to show how it's really about interactive data and not necessarily where you're viewing it. This was then, with a few lines of code, I was able to then make it to where you could AR the different components over the body. So this started off with 3D, then because we were working with the ISO standards, we were actually able to take DICOM files and then your volumetrics and then create an actual 3D model of you. What you don't see, and I learned, don't make an AR marker with a Sharpie, but so behind here, and so that's how I did the tracking and able to lay that. But the whole idea again is if you have this 3D data, how can you view it in a variety of different ways? So I got very familiar with working with medical data and then also building related data. And then back in about 2010, I was able to visit New York, and this was an example of showing where I was staying in Greenwich Village, and I wanted to show how you could do essentially that whole idea of space-to-face, or the powers of 10 for those that remember it, right? So this was on a tiling globe, and so it was in the flat where I was in, and then as you see, it zooms out, and then you're loading these different tile sets, and then this Earth was actually a part of an interactive solar system. So you could fly around the solar system, click on the different planets and learn about the planets, but then when you got to Earth, you could actually zoom all the way into the flat that I was staying in. Those 3D models were actually also supporting different standards, right? So the 3D city models were supporting CityGML, CAD files, and things like that. So I've been very much in the digital world space for quite some time. In 2007, I was able to meet a builder who wanted to essentially use robotics and video game-like technologies to build houses more efficiently. And so that's when I got brought into the world of digital fabrication, CNC subtractive, which is what they do here, Germany, and other parts. So I led the tech team where we looked at how can we use technologies to help either the people in the factory, things like digital twins, or folks out in the field. Very little with the homeowners. This is an example of where we did do things with the homeowners, essentially. So if you got a house, you were able to also then get the digital model, but then also kind of like a homeowner's manual. And then this application we did with the Microsoft Connect. It got some publicity on Wired.com. And then Esri, which is a geospatial company, saw what it was that we were doing and asked us to come down and present. So what we did here, they had just acquired this company called City Engine, that's the name of the tool. I can't remember the name of the company. And so we wanted to show how could you take geospatial data with fabrication data and then mix it together in an interactive 3D scene graph. So right when the Oculus came out, we ported this to VR. It was the first time we did this not in web-based technologies. And so what you'll see here is an application where builders would submit to us 2D blueprints and say, build this. Our guys would spend a lot of time because they're rather thorough, and they would build everything exact. And so a lot of time to chase work. And so we had a library of building components. I said, hey, why don't we do this like Legos? And so as a builder, you could go in, place those different things around. You'll see the information about that. As you look up, you'll see a total cost calculator that shows you the total cost of the project. Then you could snap together the shell of the structure, get our machine material time cost, put that in your bid. Then if your bid got accepted, then we would actually stop, polish it, and then chase that. So, and then what was neat about this, even though it looks like basic geometry, this is actually coming from the fabrication model. So for me, it's very exciting about how can you go from bits to atoms, and then network, like monitor, put sensors in and things like that, and then tie that back, into a bit. So kind of this whole idea of a cycle. And then once someone said this is what we want, in our factory in Portland, we actually do the CNC fabrication there. These things go up on trucks, go out, and then cranes essentially assemble this. And so one of my goals before coming here was taking these technologies back to Texas. They kind of had some weird things that they did recently about allowing people to walk around with guns, so I kind of slowed that down a little bit. But the goal here is that currently in Texas, it'll take you 4 to 6 months, 4 to 6 months if you're lucky, to build a shitty stick frame, 2,000 square foot home. We have built 5 to 8,000 square feet homes in about 12 weeks. And these are energy performance, so it's minimizing the building envelope. So part of my passion is taking these technologies and actually, I wouldn't say franchising, but establishing and raising the capital to build a factory in Texas where we can fabricate these building components and then essentially give superpowers to the local builders there, because a lot of builders are like 2 people and they're like, okay, if it's not at Home Depot or if it's not at Best Buy, I have no idea what to do. Then in 2013 is when I decided to scratch an itch and said, hey, how do I bring together other technologists with people in the building industry? That led to the AEC Hackathon. This is now the largest community globally that is doing open innovation for the built environment professions. We have an amazing list of many supporters of big companies from around the world. Again, this is a not-for-profit. It's completely free, volunteer, no one makes money off of this. But what's cool is it's been able to connect me with some of the innovations all around the world, and we've had a variety of events. So just running through this super quickly. As you can see, a lot of different countries that we've been in. We have one coming up this year. This was also where a gentleman here 1 year in 2016 named Peter Vesterbakke, who is actually known for Angry Birds, actually announced at our event in his keynote the Finest Tunnel initiative that he's doing. So we made Finnish news and things like that, and it was super cool. So I've been very involved with the Finnish building community here, and that we've had most of our startups of any community have come out of this. And then also this is an example of then, how do we bring technologies from other places, an example of WebXR. So some of the things that I'm doing now and working on, so this isn't an initiative I just launched, it's still kind of in stealth, but my goal here is trying to be a better ally. I saw that we need to get more women in technology. In San Francisco, there are more people that identify as women at the tech events that I have and hold than actual women, and so to change that, the idea here is how do we create a school where women can come and get lessons for free in English, Spanish, and Mandarin, and so that's this. I also recently launched a B&B where it was like, how can we take all the technologies we're talking about, cram them into a cool space. So if any of you are ever going to San Francisco and you want a really cool techie place to stay where you can talk to things, we have WebAR, artwork, stuff like that. Please check this out. And then what I hope to bring here to Finland, in addition to connecting communities, this is a company that I'm advising. This is one of our hackathon projects. If anyone here would like to just give some advice to a group of beautiful humans that are really doing something interesting, please talk to them. It's a tool that allows essentially trainers to build tools on top of reality capture scans. And then the other thing I'm hoping to do while I'm here, because I think I've run over my time, I'm pretty bad about that, is work with people on new types of interfaces. So one of the things I did at Samsung Research is a lot of things have web browsers. So how can you create an experience where like a little character lives in your watch, you put on your AR glasses, that character jumps out of your watch, runs around your house, throws a tantrum, so now your IoT, your lights are going on or off. It can run and jump in your TV, play the thing that you want, jump out, run in, and jump in your fridge. So these kinds of ideas of multi-device experiences, which we don't really see. And then also, just in conclusion, I want to essentially build a tool that takes all of those different things and then puts them kind of into an interface where someone can place geolocated points of interest. This can add value for those influencers, people in construction that are trying to get data out in the field and stuff like that, and then publish that as a progressive web app that can be viewed in web-based 3D, AR, or VR, and then hopefully someone can come in and then see things that are laid out, so other 90-day fins or something like that, and then I want to open source it to show what can be done as far as 3D city models and how cities don't have to look at proprietary solutions. They can leverage the web, own their data still to that, have that privacy, because I think to the illusion, and a lot of these companies don't understand, with the most respect to some of the ones we've seen, is that you may get your country, city to put data into your platform, but there is no way in hell another city is going to put, or another country is going to put their information into your platform if you're in another country. So I want to open source and show how Finland can be a testament of how you can do the 3D world part of World Wide Web. And I will say that I do believe that high tide raises all ships. I'm very good at raising the tide. I'm very bad at commercializing. So I hope to learn from y'all. If any of you have any ideas to help me while I'm, raising the tide in my canoe, turn that into a yacht, I'd really appreciate that, right? And thank you all. It's been lovely to meet all of you. And yeah, thank you. Oh, for sure. It was just, it was more, thank the previous 90 Day Fins, because I asked them, and so teamwork, right? But anyways, so this is recorded. I'll put this online. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Please. Of course.
I'm not a 90 Day Fin, but most of you know me. I'm Andy Crocker, Polo's other half. I'm a science teacher, so I'm going to get you up out of your seats. You're going to stand up. Welcome to my classroom. Stretch out a little bit. You've been sitting there for quite a little time. Okay. And then once you feel like you've stretched out, I want you to sit back down with an awareness of the feeling of the thing underneath you. Okay. So we'll do this together. And you can stand if you'd like. Now, those of you who I haven't spoken with, can one of you share with me what you feel as you're sitting here? Like as far as force, I'm a physics teacher, so let's try to do this in forces. What forces do you feel when you're sitting down? Someone help us out here?
Nuclear weak.
What?
Nuclear weak.
Nuclear weak. Okay. So did everyone hear her? She feels like she's being pulled down. She's standing on one leg. She feels like she's being pulled down. All right. Anyone else have a different sensation? Okay. So someone else saying, look, this thing underneath me is pushing up. So this is a fascinating thing because just by feeling those two things, it helps you understand where we were coming from in our education system. Our education system says you're being pulled down, but 100 years ago, Einstein proved that you're being pushed up, okay? And you can, if you close your eyes, you can feel the forces pushing up on you. But I challenge you to feel something pulling you down. What's fascinating is that your brain will tell you, I'm being pulled down, but if you feel the forces themselves, you can feel it pushing you up. Imagine this with me. Imagine the floor out from underneath you, the chair from underneath you, being just pulled out from under you. All the floor, the ground, everything gone. Suddenly, you do what? You fall, right? You're falling. You're free falling. Free falling, Einstein says, no forces whatsoever. You're not falling because something's pulling you. You're falling because space-time itself is shaped differently, causing you to move with space-time, okay? And that's what things do. The only reason you're not doing this right now is because something is pushing you up. Take away that thing, and you do what everything does, what satellites do. What all these things are doing is simply following the four-dimensional geometry of space-time, okay? And you and I are creating this space-time. The Earth is creating the shape of the space-time. The sun is warping space-time. And Einstein proved that in 1919. There was the sun was eclipsed by the moon, and we could watch as the starlight from a star that we shouldn't be able to see was curved by the sun to our vision. And everyone's like, no, that can't happen. But it was proven by visual evidence that it does happen. And since then, there's tons of information that have been confirmed and about black holes and waves, gravity waves, and there's just tons of evidence now that shows that we should have thrown out the Newtonian science 100 years ago, and we still haven't done it.
Okay, so that's my mission, is to try to throw out what came to us in the 16 and 1700s and usher in something that's over 100 years old into our science curriculum. So that's my job. And unfortunately, I have to leave. Tomorrow I'm flying back to the United States with my daughter. She's a freshman. She's going to start her freshman year in high school, and she says, I want to do this, with people I know. So I'm going back with her to do that. I wanted to stay the full 3 months with you all because you're amazing. But unfortunately, I can't do that. But we'll stay in touch.
Anyone else?
I'm hoping I could do mine next week because this has already been very long.
Awesome.
So,
All right. So when you stand up, we'll give a few minutes. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, we'll have a great day.
thank you.
So, when we approve this, is it possible this week? It's
Ho spostato alle 11, abbiamo 20 minuti. Sì, perché io
What I got to see before I left, because I didn't get to speak with everyone, but
io posso abbastanza, posso capire posso abbastanza no, è solo perché è solo per i members, nel senso che siamo una banana, ce l'ho di preparare. Portacciate io.
When are you guys flying out? Fortunately, I'm sure we're here.
So that's how I felt, probably about 5, yeah. Okay, so we'll keep it
Okay, I'll let you know. Starting to line up so that it's like kind of floating in the air. Thank you.
nice meeting everyone.
This is a handshake thing.
Thank you. One thought would be maybe
Okay, UK joke. Come on. Go finish the Italian night.
Might be really interesting.
British humor, yeah.
Because we are here, you know, the gravity is really.
Yes, but I had prior to this to go to the so we probably didn't go to the ourselves. Oh, yeah. Right, so that was one of the companies So basically, it's a Finnish company, and I'm going to see them. So I'll do the first bit around compound. So I'll come with it. I can't lose it. So I'll do a bit.